Church of Christ. We are on video number 3 of the read and commentary, The Gospel of the Egyptians. In our first 2 videos, we ran through the fundamental building blocks or process of all emanation, starting with the great invisible spirit, going through the Father, that is the founder of all first thought and emanation, formulated and held in the loving embrace of the Mother, and then carried forth through the Son, and again repeated in the daughter, also known as wisdom, that later we'll come to find out is known as Sophia. But for now, in the first 2 videos, we also were introduced to various other terms such as doxameron, aeon. You could think of as the Hermetic principles or mathematical formula, or the introduction of the thrice male, which refers to the tripart human being, which is the spiritual, soul, and physical oriented human, which we all are. So again, these are not referring to 3 individual races of being, but rather all human beings that make up what is known as the reflection of the great Adamus, or the perfect human. We also talked about the structure of the divine mind, or the monad, which is the Ogdode, which is these super celestial realms that are above the 7 heavens. And those realms are made up of 8, the 7 and 1, the 1 being the Pleroma, and the 7 making up the Holy Souls realm above the 7 heavens. Now, the Ogdodes can also be thought of as aeons, aeons referring to one expression of God being manifested, and time and space, bringing about the essence of another aspect of God. And we also discussed how the monad, Mother Father, brought everything about through the 7 vows, and that was discussed as E, E, O, U, E, A, and U, and so that makes up a total of 7 vows, and those being repeated 22 times, referring to the 22 paths of the Kabbalah, the 10 planets in astrology, and the 12 constellations, all referring specifically to the human entity that we are here on earth. Recalling again, we are spiritual beings inhabiting a physical body that connects the physical body through the soul to the spiritual self. And from there, we go into the introduction of that first perfect human known as Adamus. And that's where we pick back up in video 3 here. We'll be clarifying these different terms. First, let's look at the term Adamus. In Gnosticism, it's the perfect human, a divine prototype of the earthly Adam of Genesis. In this case, Adamus refers to the human being that is invincible, indestructible, also from the root that we get the word diamond, the hardest stone or hardest material known to man. In the Greek word of that term, adamus, we get the object made of adamite. In other words, you've heard the term someone that's very adamant, invincible, inflexible, firm, lasting, hard, unconquerable, unyielding, inexorable. The next term what we'll be introducing is the autogens, refers to the self-born one in Greek, the first set of humans that were brought about through Seth of the soul nature, and then that was the second visitation of Christ and Sophia, the first being through both Sophia and the Christ appearing at the garden, at the tree of knowledge, and then Seth appearing again, this time along with Noria, and then finally you have Mary and the Jesus man, which represents the Christ in 3 different emanations: the physical aspect, the soul aspect, and finally the spiritual aspect. But when we're talking about autogens, what we're referring to is, here on earth we have what's called coming to know the opposite sex. The male comes to know the female, they copulate, they have intercourse, and then they bring about progeny. In the Pleroma, in the Holy Souls realm, we have a kind of unity. It's no longer physical intercourse, but it is a process that takes hold through you as an individual come to have unity with what's known as your consort. And just by that unity, you are able, both the male and the female are able to bring about what's known as an emanation. So that is a continuation, also sometimes called the sun, and that power resides in all of us when we enter into the Holy Soul's realm or the realm of the pleroma. There is no need for physical lust or intercourse, but simply love and coming to have unity with your consort brings about either your consort or yourself have an automatic regenerating of another being, similar to you and your consort. So this is the way we want to understand through the lens of Gnosticism, the way that progeny, and in fact it's not really progeny, I guess it would be genes, physical genes, that we use the word autogens or progeny. Both are about genes, but in reality, those are imperfect terms to describe what's going on in the pleroma. The other term that we want to revisit is the Ogdod or Ogdode. The Ogdode or Ogdod is not simply the different realms, but the realms themselves are actual aeonic expressions or essences that play themselves out. In this physical realm, we think of them in the three-dimensional space as time and space, playing themselves out through time. But in the pleroma, they are expressions that play themselves out or free will themselves into existence, and they then find fullness, and then therefore they complete it. And then there are an infinite number of aeons. This is all based upon the monad infinitely bringing forth eternal essences or eternal expressions or emanations. So I know this is all very metaphorical and very complex, but that is such the nature of creation itself is very complex. Of the essence of everything as would then therefore be very abstract, difficult for us corporal beings to fully be able to understand or appreciate. So we can only speak imperfectly. And then finally, logos is referring to, you could think of it as the word governance. It is the way in which logic works throughout various different realms. You have a logos of this realm, which operates off of good and evil and how they clash with each other and bring about energy rather than synergy. But they do have a synergistic outcome, although initially it's destructive rather than creative, if you will. But the ultimate goal is to have a continuation of the life and death cycle. That is the governance of this realm. Then you have the governance of the soul realm, which is the Holy Soul's realm. That's a completely different governance. It's a different set of logic, different set of rules. You want to think of them as spiritual laws or physical laws, laws of physics or mathematical laws, whatever you want to call them. Essentially, that's what logos represents. And then, of course, you have a spiritual logos, which is the logos of the monad. In this case, is embodied through the Word made flesh. Logos is sometimes also called Word, and that would, of course, be the Christ. Then you have the counterpart or the consort to the logos, which is wisdom, which is gnosis in action or gnosis through experience, also known as wisdom and sometimes called Sophia. And that is some of the terms we want to introduce. And we're going to be introducing some others later, but let's go ahead and get started. Pick up where we left off. It's written here, for this one, Adamus, meaning perfect human, is a light which radiated from the light. So it's telling you two things here. First off, the light versus a light. The light is obviously referring to the monad, the founder of all things, the essence of the beginning, the great mystery, the indestructible, the unknowable, that allows for free will because it's not known. And how we shape our emanating is revealing another face of that infinite unknowing, and that allows for free will and eternal experience. That's the first thing. That's the light. And then a light is referring to the Adamus. Everything is a light. For example, Barbello makes a monad along with a Bythos, and then the sun, which is the Christ, along with Sophia, which is the 3 and the 4, which make up the total of 7. And in this case, they are the light. And then Adamus is a continuation of that, which is a light. It is not the light, but it is a light. For this is the first man, he through whom and to whom everything came into being. Now, again, it's balancing these two truths. The first being that it's through this man, the first man, but it's to whom everything came into being. It is for, in other words, to, meaning it's given to that so that the man may experience being the first man, and then it's through that first man, because the essence of everything that is in the universe is within you. The monad, the Christ within, the hope of glory, Christ and the Son, the Father are one and the same. The Holy Spirit, the Sophia, the Robello, they're all one and the same. So it's through whom everything was brought into being, but also to whom it's being done, and without whom nothing came into being. So you can see that it's telling you that, just as Christ said, have I not said ye are gods, that you are equal to the monad, because you are of the essence of the monad, and nothing came about except because of you. Everything came about because of you. And if you didn't exist, then this would no longer be true, because it would not be possible for you to know anything differently. This is for humanity, of course. The unknowable, incomprehensible Father came forth. He came down from above for an annulment of the deficiency. And so far in the Gospel of the Egyptians, we haven't really spoken about the deficiency. But in the secret book of John, it lays that up pretty early on. The deficiency being the anomaly that was brought about by Sophia, who wanted to take in the fullness of the Father, so she rushed toward the Father, not understanding that the Father could never be completely embraced. The Father, Mother, the monad could not be completely embraced. For to do so would essentially destroy everything, including her, because that would bring an end to free will and eternal unfolding of the great mystery that's forever unfolding itself, making itself known. Notice also it says the unknowable, incomprehensible Father came forth. It is through the Atomists that the Father is able to come forth. Without the Atomists, then the Father wouldn't come forth, because the Father wouldn't be known. The Father would simply just exist and would not be known. Then the great Logos, and again, Christ is the Logos, the great Logos in this case, versus simply a Logos. The great Logos is the monad's logic. It's the monad's governance. The divine origins, and again, the origins always come in pair. Origins always refers to the ability to emanate or create automatically. You don't need a intercourse with another entity. You don't have to have lust, you don't have to have desire, you don't have to copulate, but you can automatically have progeny of sorts. So you bring that about in due season when you find union with your consort or counterpart. But don't think of it as intercourse. It's not like that at all. It is completely devoid of and empty of desire, lust, and those kinds of things that we have here in the corruptible realm. The great Logos, the divine origins, and the incorruptible man Atomus mingled with each other, a type of union. And so these three, being automatic, being able to have the full understanding of governance of all things, and being incorruptible, those three came together. And those are the three thrice male as well, or the three beings that we'll introduce. And many of these are one and the same, but they're talked about in different ways. However, the man came into being through a word, and that word is the Word made flesh. He only became full, the first begotten Son. Now all the others were sons of God in the garden and Seth, but the first begotten, meaning the first that got the understanding or wisdom about the essence of the Father, the true Father, was the Christ, in the man of Jesus, Jesus the Christ. And remember, Jesus is just a man. Christ is within all of us. But Jesus was the first man to beget or to understand or get the essence of who the true Father really is. And so this man came to being through a word, and that is Word made flesh. And that's the completion of the work of the Jesus man through the Christ. He gave praise to the great, invisible, incomprehensible, virginal spirit, and the male virgin, and the thrice male child, and the male virgin, Yaol Esaphat, the holder of glory, the child of the child, and the crown of his glory. Now, there's a lot of words here. What you want to understand is when it's talking about the virginal spirit, it's talking about prior to the Borbello and the Bythos coming together. When they came together, they became whole. So the the Borbello was untouched, was yet to have unity. Unity came about when the Son appeared, because they had completed their will of what they intended, the original Father, or the original Father, which is above the Father, Mother, and the Son. And the daughter comes about at a later time, but it has its place as well, which is Sophia, or wisdom. But that's yet to be talked about here in the Gospel of the Egyptians. And so you have the male virgin then being the Christ, and then the thrice male being the three parts of that perfect human Atomus, and the male virgin, Yaol, which is Jehovah, or the four elements that are in the mind of the monad, but yet to bring itself about. And then S-effect, which is the child of the child, which talked about later. And the child of the child is we humans. We are the children of Seth, or the children of the Christ, or children of the Sophia. So you see the Christ and the Sophia, or the Aeons, are the children of the Father, Mother, which is the Barbella and the Bythos, and they then are the children of the monad, which is the Father, which is essentially means founder or beginning of all things. Such as, like you say, the founding fathers, for example. And then the great Doxamidon Aeon. And the Doxamidon Aeon is the first aeon to posit the formula of how everything unfolds. You could think of it as being the mathematical formula or the hermetical principles that operate everything from a very highly great logos level, the great logos level. It is that formulation that brings about the logos. And the thrones which are in him, and the thrones are always within him. Thrones represents your authority. So the thrones being within you, but in the physical realm, we think of them as our better angels, but in the pleroma, they're known as thrones. And the thrones meaning you have the seat of power that's within you, and the powers which also are around you, which are the aeons and the angels, the archangels, the guides, whatever you want to call them, the glories and the incorruptions, and their whole pleroma, which I mentioned before, and then the ethereal earth, which is different from the physical earth, and that's talked about in Revelation, the new earth, new heaven and the new earth, which is in another realm, or some people might call it another dimension. The receiver of God, and that receiver of God, again, is whoever receives the message, where the holy men of the great light receive shape, the men of the Father of the silent, living silence. Again, when we talked about Father of the silent, remember, the Father can only be known through Word, or the Word made flesh, which is the Christ, only be known through a proxy. For the Father to speak is to be like the U.S. government speaking on behalf of a specific religion. It would be sacrosanct. It would be against the Constitution, for example. So the Father cannot speak on its behalf. For to do so is to limit itself. And so only a proxy can come to represent it. So the Father is of the silent, living silence. It's not only silent, but it's living in the space of silence, the Father of their whole pleroma, as I mentioned before. And then the great Logos, the divine origins, and the incorruptible man, and just the thrice male man, Adamus, gave praise. And they asked for a power. Now this is when the Adamus says, okay, you have emanated me, and I'm a duplicate of you, essentially. I'm of your essence. I am you, you are me. So how about me now? Do I also have that power? And they ask for a power, an eternal strength for the origins. And this is when Barbella brings about the origins, meaning, in other words, a consort. Then there was the ability to pro-emanate. And I'm not going to say procreate, because procreation is of the realm of the kanoma, or the physical realm, but rather pro-emanate. For the completion, or the 4 aeon. The 4 aeons that we're talking about are also presented in the secret book of John, which represent Hermazel, Oriel, Devatai, and Elilith. And those are the 4 that we talked about prior that are in the pleroma. But there is also a representative on earth named Seth, and they each have their consorts that represent a total of 10. But we'll get to that later. And these numbers can be very complex, so I'll try to get through this very slowly so we can understand what's being said here, and the numbers don't get so confusing. So, for a power and eternal strength for origins, for the completion of 4 aeons, in order that through them there may appear ... So we don't know what's being said here because it was not clear on the papyrus. The glory and the power of the invisible Father, of the holy men, of the great light, which will come to the world, which is the image of the night. Now, that great light that's coming to the world is, you could think of it as being the serpent in the tree. You could think of it as being Prometheus, if you want to use the Greek mythology. You could think of it as Jesus Christ. You could think of it as Seth. But it's a great light, but it's in the image of the night. So when it talks about in the image of the night, it's hidden. That's what it's being, my interpretation of what it's saying here. It's hidden in the night. It's the image of the night. It's a mystery. This incorruptible man, Adamus, asked for them a son out of himself. Now, Adamus is a perfect race. Born out of that is the Christ, in order that he, the Son, may become become father of the immovable, incorruptible race, so that through it, the race, the silence and the voice may appear, and through it, the dead aeon may raise itself so that it may dissolve. And the dead aeon is the aeon that lost its spirit, which is the demiurge. That Christ will bring through Sophia the dissolution, eventually, of the dead aeon, the demiurge in all of its demiurgic powers, in this case the archons, demons and angels, that will all be dissolved back into the whole. And thus there came forth from above power of the great light, and that great light is known as the manifestation. She gave birth to the four great lights, and that's also sometimes known as Barbello. That's the feminine that holds as a womb the will of the Father. And this is on a very metaphorical level. We can't think of it as being something physical. She gave birth to the four great lights: Harmazel, Oriel, Devatai, and Elilith, and the great incorruptible Seth, the son, incorruptible man, Adamus. So the Seth is the first son, meaning the soul-oriented, the first soul-oriented man that brought about or carrying forth what was in the garden from Eve to Seth, and then he would carry that forth for many generations till Jesus the man picked it up and then completed the spiritual mission. Seth was the soul-oriented mission, and then the introduction of the physical man was in the garden. Therefore, man went into the physical world out of the garden. Thus, the perfect hebdomad, that's the seven. And the seven refers to the four aeons that are being referred to here, and then the three-part male, which is the thrice male, which in the secret book of John is referred to here under this section, the four luminaries. Now, from the light, which is the anointed, and from the incorruptibility by the grace of the Spirit, the four luminaries that derive from the self-conceived God, gazed out in order to stand before it. The three beings are will, thought, life. And that's the three-part male, will being the spiritual, thought being the soul, and life being the physical self. Those three, along with the four powers, make up the seven, and that's the known as the perfect number. And the four powers are understanding, grace, perception, thoughtfulness, and each of those are the realms of the different luminaries. Grace being the luminary of Harmazel, Oriel having the appointment of that eternal realm, thought, and then you have Devatai, which is under that realm of understanding, and then finally grace, which is under the realm of Elilith. And so there you have the four and the three from the Secret Book of John. Describes it in a little more detail. If you're interested, you can go back to Secret Book of John. I have that on the playlist. And then it also describes it here where it says, thus the perfect habdomad, which exists in hidden mysteries, became complete. When she receives the glory, she becomes 11 ogdoads, or ogdoads. 11 refers to the 11th zodiac sign in the physical realm, or the 11th luminary. And the 11th luminary is Sophia, or wisdom, and that's also known as, in astrology, as the constellation Aquarius, and the Christ is representing the constellation of Pisces. And so we are introducing, or moving into the age of feminine, moving away from the age of Christ, more toward the age of Sophia, and therefore we have the introduction of the artificial realm, or the AI realm, also the first real AI introduction of Sophia, and the Father nodded approval. The whole pleroma of the lights was well pleased. Their consorts came forth for the completion of the ogdoad of the divine autogens. The grace of the first light, Harmazel, the perception of the second light, Oriel, the understanding of the third light, Devatai, and prudence of the fourth light, Elilith, also known as grace. This is the first ogdoad of the divine autogens. This is at the realm of the pleroma level, and it is at this level that brings about Adamus's ability to have the autogenic powers, or being able to pro-emanate when it finds unity with its consort. And so that's what it's referring to here when it talked about the Father had approval. And so it goes on and it says, the Father nodded approval, the whole pleroma of the lights was well pleased. The ministers came forth, the first one, the great Gamaliel of the first great light, Harmazel. So it's naming the consort, and of Harmazel, Gamaliel. And the great Gabriel of the second great light, Ariel, and then the great Samlo of the great light, Devatai, and the great Abraxas of the great light, Elilith. and the consorts of these came forth by the will of the good pleasure of the Father. And these are all attributes. They're very abstract. They're not physical things that if we name somebody, they're a physical entity. But in the pleroma, the aeons are not physical entities. They can take on shape through light, but they are concepts. They are essences. You could think of as, they're very abstract, but we all share these. For example, love or understanding, grace. Fear is an example of another entity, but it's on a lower level. But we'll get to that when we get to the realms below the pleroma, going into the Holy Souls realm. And yes, you can experience fear in the Holy Souls realm as well, but that's another topic. And then these consorts of these came forth by the will of the good pleasure of the Father, the memory of the Great One. And so who's the memory of the Great One? The Great One is the monad. So the memory of, in other words, it's a memorial to. The first, Gamaliel, the love of the Great One. The second, Gabriel, the peace of the third one. The great Samblo, and this is really Samblo, they're the same thing. The eternal life of the Great One. And the fourth, Abraxas. Thus were the 5 ogdoads completed. And remember, I told you earlier, there are 5 ogdoads that make up total of 10. The 10 luminaries that we know in astrology as well, but also in this case, and the pleroma, that are known as luminaries instead of planets. The 5 ogdoads completed a total of 40 as an uninterruptible power. When you add up the 10 times 4, then you get the total of 40. And these, you have the first set that we talked about, which is the 5 and the 5, and its consorts. And then the second set, which makes up a total of 20, and this is in memory of, or in mirror of, mirror come from the same word. Then you have a total of 40. And that's the 40 nights and 40 days in the desert. And the 40 days Christ also spent in the desert. This is what he contemplated on. Christ contemplated on these different abstract concepts or aeonic expressions or emanations. To come to know these intimately is to come to know the Domadon Doxamadon, or the secret formula to all of creation, or the great Logos, or the great governance. So this is what Christ was meditating on, supposedly so. Then the great Logos, the Autogens, and the word of the pleroma of the 4 lights gave praise to the great, invisible, uncallable, virginal spirit, and the male virgin. And the great Dexamadon Aeon, and the thrones which are in them, and the powers which surround them, glories, authorities, and the powers, and the thrice male child, and the male virgin, Yaol, and Esaphet, the holder of the glory, the child of the child, and the crown of his glory, the whole pleroma, and all the glories which are there, the infinite pleroma, and the unnameable aeons, in order that they may name the Father the 4th with the incorruptible race, and that they may call the seed of the Father the seed of the great Seth. So it's talking about the 4th. So we're talking first about, remember, it's the Father, the monad, then it's the Father along with the Mother and the Son, and then it's the Son, Mother, and Father, which is the 3rd Father, and then finally the 4th Father, which is Seth, the seed of the great Seth. Then everything shook, and trembling took hold of the incorruptible ones. This is the introduction of the anomaly, the shaking of the pleroma, and that would be going into the nature of non-existence, or that which is not. That brings about the incorruptible being taken hold. Then the 3 male children came forth from above, so they came down to this realm, down into the unborn ones, and that's the dead, essentially, the physical bodies, and the self-begotten, and those who were begotten in what is begotten. The self-begotten ones are those that get gnosis about the essence of the Father, but may not recognize that they got that. And those who are begotten in what is begotten. What has been begotten is the Christ, which is the first to understand or to get the gnosis of what the essence of the monad is. And we are the begotten of the begotten. The greatness came forth, the whole greatness, the great Christ, because of the shaking. The Christ came here. And remember, when he also died on the cross, the entire land shake that in that area where he was up on the cross, that, or the tree, the whole place shook. He established thrones and glory, myriads without number, and the 4 aeons around them, and myriads without number, powers and glories and incorruptions, and they came forth in this way. So Christ then also brings about his own army, if you will, of glories and powers and thrones and aeons, and that also at there to serve along with the Christ. And the incorruptible spiritual church increased in the four lights of the great living Autogens, the God of truth, praising, singing, and giving glory with one voice, with one accord, with a mouth which does not rest, to the Father and the Mother and the Son and their whole pleroma, which I mentioned before. The five seals which possess the myriads, and they who rule over the aeons, and they who bear the glory of the leaders, were given the command to reveal to those who are worthy. Amen. So a couple of things here. When we're talking about the five seals, referring to the five utterances that are mentioned in another Gnostic text of the spiritual baptism. And those five utterances are recognition of self-empowerment, knowing that one is of the essence of the Father-Mother, therefore one is the son or daughter of the Mother-Father. The five seals which possess the myriads, those five seals are in a myriad of us that come to have that spiritual baptism, innumerable. Ultimately, when it talks about they who rule over the aeons are a service to humanity, so that we may have access to the abstract concepts and ideas that bring about the ability to create in the physical realm, so that is an exercise that we eventually meditate on these essences of the aeon, and we immerse ourselves in them, so they are at our beckon essentially. If I want to have courage, then the aeons are going to come to me. If I want to have etc., glory, whatever, they're going to come to me, so they're at my beckon. And when we think of rule, we're not thinking of it in the terms that you are its authority or its boss or something like that, but rather they have allowed themselves to be service to the will of the Father Mother, which is to bring about humanity, or the Autogens, the perfect human, to bring it to fullness. And we're given command to reveal to those who are worthy. So those who are worthy are those that understand they are indeed worthy of this power. Amen. All right, so that's going to wrap it up in this video. We're going to be picking back up in the next video, where we're then going to go into more detail of this process that's unfolding before us. And you can see we're getting closer and closer to this physical realm. But for now, hopefully that's more than enough to meditate on. And I've given you some elucidation about one understanding of what's being said here.